going to be talking today about my experience as a Muslim woman, Lebanese from Australia, who left a domestic violence situation and is now living independently and building their own life. The reason why I want to put this out into the world is because myself, as a young person, when I was making the decision to leave my situation, I searched tirelessly on the internet for other, specifically Muslim women who have done the same thing and their experiences with that and how they managed to do it, because I was like, I need to see someone else doing it to make it feel like it's possible and it's not going to be the end of everything. It was the end of a lot, but it wasn't the end of everything. Yeah, so I want to put this out on the internet because I feel like it's a story worth sharing. I feel like other people would really greatly benefit from it. And, for those people who are going to hate on me and, insult me and talk about how I'm, some sort of evil person, betrayer, whatever, I don't really care what you say. My point of putting this out is for the beautiful people who are also struggling and who have to come to terms with making a huge decision like this, which, by the way, no one ever wants to do this. This is not something anyone just wants to do for no reason. This is something you're considering. There's been a lot of things that have led you up to this point. So I'm sorry that you're here. I'm sorry that you're watching this video. But I wanted to share this experience, and I want to share my love and my care for you, and you'll get through this. I'm going to share this in different parts. Part one is why. What led me to the point of deciding to leave? What led me to make this decision? For context, I live in Western Sydney. I'm Muslim, I'm Lebanese. I have always been someone who in my family was known to be quite quiet, kept to themselves, and not threat. But through this process of deciding to leave and making this decision, I definitely became a threat to everyone and everything. But this context is important because, in growing up in Western Sydney, growing up in the situation I grew up in, I didn't think there was ever a way that I was actually going to leave, and I didn't think there was ever a way I was going to leave and be able to build a good life. I always thought that, and during the process of leaving, I thought it was a pipeline dream. I thought it was a fantasy. I thought it was unachievable. And when I would say that I want to leave and talk to people and make plans about leaving, it always felt like I was never actually going to do it. But all that preparation and all that planning and imagining was so important to lead me to the moment when I actually did, because then when I actually did, I had thought about it and I had prepared myself for it. And in a lot of ways, I had protected myself from some of the harms of leaving. I want to talk about the situation. I want to talk about myself more specifically, but for the sake of not creating more trouble in my life right now, I'm not going to. I'm going to talk more generally, and I'm not going to be specific and name people because that's something that would be harmful for me right now. So what I am going to say is I grew up with violence. I grew up with a lot of unhappiness, grew up in constant fight or flight mode, and all of these different experiences that I had growing up, as anyone would when they're in something that feels terrible, constantly dreamt of leaving, constantly dreamt of what would it be like to not have to deal with this shit every day? What would it be like if I could just exist without criticism, without worrying about safety, without so many things? What would it be like if I could live like that? What would it be like if I can do my art without interruption? What would it be like if I could pray and, express my faith without interruption? Like, what would it be like if I didn't have to dread coming home, and instead I could love to come home because it's a resting place from the chaos of the rest of the world. So it was felt like a fantasy. It felt like it was never going to happen. Growing up, I thought all the things that I experienced and dealt with were normal. I thought everyone else was experiencing it. I thought everyone else's families and friends were all the same way. Um, they weren't. And when I realized that in high school, um, and I realized the things that I was dealing with, most of the other people at school weren't dealing with those things. And when they talked about their relationships and the positive things in those relationships, I was like, I don't think I've ever had that. And I couldn't really understand that. So, like, the first step of getting to the point where I decided to leave was questioning, was understanding that the situation that I'm in, the things that I was experiencing weren't normal, weren't okay, and were actually, in fact, abusive. It's one of the hardest parts, I think the hardest part, because that's when you start to have to accept the reality of things and people around you and have to accept that despite the claim that they're there for you and that they, I don't know, despite like the fact that they're supposed to be people who care for you, they were actually delivering harm. And, you know, even if you take in context, even if you take in their upbringing and things like that, it's the harm cannot continue to be excused and allowed. And growing up, I feel like I've always had a very strong justice core. I loved very strongly, and I cared so much for everyone. I was told I was very sensitive, but I never wanted anyone to feel bad. I never wanted anyone to experience harm or upset. So I would try and, where I can, take the brunt of the crap so that other people don't have to deal with it. And I would put myself in conflict to protect other people. I've just always felt very protective of other people's happiness and right to peace and enjoyment of the world. And yeah, that led me to constantly be putting myself in, I guess, harm's way in a lot of ways. But it also made me very brave, and it made me someone who doesn't accept what I'm told is normal and is okay and I'm supposed to accept. So it led me to like take actual account of what was going on, accept that people aren't going to like me, accept that the things that I'm doing, the things that I'm saying, and putting myself at risk were actually things that I had to do, and things that were essential not just for my ability to continue in the world, but for other people's as well. And I felt like really God put me there and put me in this situation because I'm the only one who was able to deal with it. Not that the other people weren't dealing with it, they were, but I felt like I was the one that was going to make the tough decisions because I don't think that anyone else could have, in the situation that I lived in. So it was a lot of questioning. It was a lot of, I don't think this is going to happen. It was a lot of, oh, imagine if I could just like go and sit down and watch what I want on TV and, eat what I want and not be constantly like on edge and not be constantly interrupted and criticized. And, imagine I could like, just not constantly be hyper aware of my bodies and my appearance and, imagine I could just like breathe. Like it was just a lot of like imagine about peace, imagine about calm, imagine about non-conflict. And that was like a lot of the build up and dreaming and creating that reality was a lot of imagining. And even though within myself I didn't feel quite convinced that I would ever reach that, the imagining was really important. And so I thought about all the different ways I could leave the situation that I was in, including the darker ones, including the scarier in a lot of ways ones, the more permanent ones. And to be frank, I'm going to actually say explicitly rather than in code, I considered suicide as an actual way out of the situation I was in. Islamically, in my faith, suicide is against against the law, I guess, the Islamic law, and it is not seen as an actual option. And because it's not, in a lot of ways, it's not. Suicide is giving up, and I'm glad I never actually went down. At least I'm glad I never gave up. And I decided instead to deal with the uncomfortable and deal with the hard and get through all of that because I had hope, and I just had so much faith that that peace and that what I was envisioning could be real at some point. One of the ways, so that's one of the ways that I thought was a way out. And if anyone's watching this, and if you've ever felt this way, I want you to know it's not really. And you deserve to actually have a good life in this life. And you deserve to find that peace and happiness in this life. It's going to be getting through a lot of shit. It's going to be experiencing some of the scariest things that you've ever experienced. But once you get through that, it's worth it. And like the peace is so much that you're fighting so hard for, it is worth it. So if you are experiencing that, if you are considering that, please get support, call the suicide helpline. I'm going to put some information here or here. And also, I have to say, during the process of coming to terms with everything, one of the things that I sought out was therapy and support. And I started actually seeing someone and discussing the situation. And that also was something that helped me come to terms with the fact that I was experiencing violence and that it wasn't okay. So professional support is a huge part of that journey as well. In whatever way that you can safely do that. It can be a phone call. It can be actually making an appointment and seeing people in person. It could be through your school counselor, depending on your age. It could be even through your work counselor. Yeah, so that was a huge part of it. Professional support is really important. And the avenues that I considered as escape were suicide. It was marrying someone just to leave, which, you know, it seems like an option, but when you're in a trauma state and you're looking for an outside savior, you start to look at a lot of people through rose-colored glasses and look at a lot of actually really messed up people as options when they're not. And I had that experience of considering some very messed up people, in which I experienced more abuse from them because I thought that was an alternative way out. But it's a lot of, yeah, I'm yapping on forever. This is going to take like 100 years to get through. But that was one of the ways that I considered it. So it was like suicide. It was getting married to leave. It was just disappearing on my own and never saying anything to anyone, leaving the country. Or it was, you know, actually leaving and taking protections in place and building a new life. Yeah. So, which the most, I guess, sane of those options seemed the most impossible, but I did it. And this is the beginning part of it. This is the contemplation that I don't know what's going to happen. I don't think I can do it. I'm so scared. But I did it, and I'm here, and I'm talking about it. So yeah, the first part of all of this craziness, being in a messed up situation, was imagining. It was contemplating. It was picturing. And I had to assess, what are my options? How do I deal with this? How can I get out of this? And those were the options that I considered. And at points, it felt like one option was better than the other. But ultimately, the best option in that situation, also, there are other options that I haven't listed, that I haven't said here. Incriminating. But out of all of those options, actually, the scariest was the most sane one, which was just to leave. It was just go. You don't have to physically be in the space anymore and deal with it. You don't have to physically be around these people and deal with it. Like, you can actually make decisions about that. You can actually say, I don't want to deal with this. You can say, I don't want this to be my life. And go and leave.